Darwin is the capital city of the Northern Territory in Australia. In the early days of aviation, aircraft coming from Europe come through the Indonesian archipelago and make landfall at Darwin. In Darwin, one of the main streets is Smith Street, and if you walk that street you'll come across the Victoria Hotel. It has a long history of association with early aviation in Australia. But what's the history of the Victoria Hotel itself? Well, it all starts with a 19th century entrepreneurial and wealthy woman, Ellen Ryan, who had the hotel built, mostly out of local stone, opened for business in 1890. It was a substantial building, and so when 7 years later, the Great Hurricane, as it was called, demolished most of Darwin and killed 28 people, the Victoria Hotel stood strong, even if it had lost its roof. The hotel passed to other strong women, May Brown in 1921 and Christina Gordon in 1928. As I say, those early aviators chose the Victoria Hotel because it was central and because it offered good accommodation. In the entrance to that hotel is a plaque. It lists the names of those aviators and the dates that they stayed at the Victoria. In 1921, Ross and Keith Smith, taking part in the England to Australia air race, stayed there. 3:50 p.m, Vimy, G-E-A-O-U, landed Darwin. 27 days, 20 hours from England to Australia. After a total of 135 hours in the air, they had done it. Hudson Fysh, the co-founder of Qantas, made sure he too was at the Vic. Qantas was founded just a year later in 1920 with the intention of offering international routes through Darwin. So you can imagine that Fysh would have been very keen to talk to the Smith brothers about their flight from Europe. Others to stay included, in 1924, Horace Brinsmead, the first round Australia Air Mile flight. 1928, famed aviator Bert Hinkler, the first solo to England-Australia flight. 1929, Sydney Moir and Harold Owen, first England to Australia flight by an air freighter. Alas, they had crashed at Cape Don, 170 kilometres northeast of Darwin, and were found there by Lester Brain in a Qantas aircraft. That same year, Lester Brain found the late Lieutenant Keith Anderson and Robert Hitchcock's aeroplane, the Kookaburra, in the Tanami Desert. That unfortunate duo had been searching for Charles Kingsford Smith and Charles Ulm, reported missing in the Southern Cross. Other aviators to stay at the Vic. 1930, Charles Kingsford Smith, after his record England to Darwin flight. 1931, Charles Scott, record England to Darwin flight. These England to Darwin record flights were of course flights that bettered the time of the one previous. That's why you could have so many. In 1931, Arthur Butler, record England to Darwin flight.
I'm afraid I cannot say anything except thank you, and also to tell you I'm jolly glad to be back in Australia.
1931, Jimmy Broadbent, record around Australia flight. 1931, Russell Tapp, Qantas experimental air mail service, Darwin to Kopang in Indonesia. In 1933, Loris Bonney, the first woman to fly from Australia to England, stayed at the Vic in the aviators room. 1934, Lester Brain, first regular Australia to England airmail service. Alas, the Victoria Hotel closed in 2014, mired in debt and unable to adapt to changing times. Will this building fall into disrepair and be demolished? I hope not. The facade will survive, being registered on the National Estate as a historic site. So if you're ever in Darwin, have a walk down Smith Street, find the Victoria Hotel and look for that plaque. Contemplate the bravery of those men and women who made those hazardous flights and made history. Thank you.